Evening, Martin. Can you hear me? Martin, can you hear me?
Martin, can you hear us okay on the microphones?
I can now, yes. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Apologies, Martin. There was cross-Martination there. I was checking with a colleague on the panel. I'm glad that you can join us loud and clear from the back of Beyond Remote Distance. But Councillor
A lot of
Vaughan,
Martins, yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to this meeting on Thursday, the 8th of February 2024. I'm Councillor Steph Nissen. I'm a councillor for Castle Ward and the chair of this panel, and I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being held in the Grand Jury Room in the Town Hall in Colchester, and it's also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via our council's YouTube channel, and we have a number of attendees joining us remotely as well. The recording will also be available to view afterwards. Please, if you are speaking, use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone. This is to ensure that everybody can hear what we're saying and participate in the meeting. In the event of an emergency, there are no practice alarms planned for this evening. If an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. Councillors and officers taking part in the meeting are requested to mute their microphones and your mobile phones as well. Please activate the microphone when invited to speak and turn the microphone off again when you have finished speaking. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. However, you need to use these discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. This is for accessibility reasons. The provisions in the Constitution of the Council around the timing of breaks will apply to this meeting, and consideration will be given to having a break at 7:30, depending on the items of business remaining or any urgent need to take a break. I will now ask members of the committee and the attending officers to introduce themselves, starting on my left.
Good evening, Mel Rundle, Head of Sustainability and Support to Panel.
Good evening, I'm Rosa Tanfield. I'm the Group Manager for Neighbourhood Services.
Ben Plummer, Climate Emergency Officer.
Pam Cox, Councillor for Newtown Christchurch.
Martin Warnes, Peer Church Ward.
Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward.
Tracy Arnold for Stanway Ward.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Andrew Ellis, Mark State.
Excuse me, whoever's got a device that's near to the microphone, please.
Shall we'll carry on?
Please continue. Sorry, Councillor Douglas.
Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Sue Lissimore, Pretty Good Ward.
Councillor Natalie Summers, St Anne's, St John's Ward.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, thank you all very much. So this evening we have two councillor substitutions. We have Councillor Sam McCarthy in place of Councillor Moffat, and we have Councillor Martin Warnes in place of Councillor Molly Bloomfield. In terms of item number 3, there are no urgent items, which is a line I love to say. That's great news. So can I invite, for item number 4, councillors to say if you have any items on the agenda for which you have a disclosable pecuniary interest, which would prevent either participation in the discussion or participation in the vote upon the item. No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh, pardon me.
Chair, I'm not sure whether I do have an actual interest. I see you've got the Colchester Fleet Transition Strategy up, and I am chair of CCHL.
That's noted. Thank you, Councillor Warnes. So I would now like to invite councillors to confirm that the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 6th of December 2023 and provided within the meeting pack, are an accurate record of the meeting. I have a hand from Councillor Cox.
I have a matter arising. I don't know if we take it now or further down.
Happy to take it now. Thank you, Councillor
sure.
Cox.
Thank you very much. It's to do with the Warm Homes and Homes Upgrade grant schemes that we discussed last time in December. And I'm looking at paragraph 110 on page 11 of the minute. The minutes are accurate. The matter arising for me is around two questions. One, what have the CC comms team and domestic energy efficiency coordinator been able to do to improve the communication around those schemes? If that's still pending, that's fine, but it would be just good to have an update on that so we keep that live. Remember, the context of this was that we returned money to government because we were unable to push it out to residents for home upgrade grants. I think we returned over £250,000 year before last. And we've got a fresh tranche of money, so really important that we get that out to residents. And the second question is, Ben Plummer and I and a couple of others organised an event to encourage the uptake of those grants a couple of weeks ago in Newtown, where lots of residents live in old drafty homes. So it's prime target for these areas. And what came up at that event was that many people cannot get an EPC, an Energy Performance Certificate, which is a requirement for being able to apply for the scheme. One reason they can't get it is because it costs £100 or more to get it. And if you've got priority debts, you cannot, and landlords may not do it for tenants and so on. So the question was, what can we do as a council to maybe look at that particular barrier to the uptake of these schemes? And I understand there's been some work around that in the last week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cox. I'd like to give Mel Rundle the opportunity to respond on that quickly before we move on to the next items on the agenda. Thank you, Mel.
In terms of the promotion and things of the scheme, I'll pass over to Ben shortly, because some of you may not know, Keith, who was our coordinator, has now left. He's gone to ECC, so Ben is picking up the baton in terms of that scheme. In terms of the EPC issue you raise, I actually received an email from the leader yesterday about this very issue that had been raised via the Citizens Advice Bureau, and myself and Ben and other colleagues had a meeting today. We are going to see whether or not some of the funding we receive through our health partners could be repurposed to support those vulnerable households that can't afford to have an EPC, to fund that, to enable them to remove the blocker to getting the energy assessment done. So literally had a conversation about 3 hours ago, and we'll update you as soon as hopefully we have some positive news.
Thanks very much, Mel. Thanks very much, Mel. Okay. Ben, that'd be great.
Yeah, so on point one, so we did a post on our social media in early January to help promote the grants, particularly the home upgrade grant, which is Grid Homes. We also, as part of that post, we helped to promote an event that we held in Langham Community Centre, as that is near where quite a lot of the households are typically going to be off gas grid, typically rural properties, things like that. Fairly good attendance at that event. For in-person events can be a struggle to get people to, so we were quite pleased with the uptake we got from that actually. And we're exploring other options for how we can reach households who we think are likely to be eligible, in terms of sort of the ones that are easiest to sort of get through the schemes, considering that they can be quite complex. I think we're probably looking at older households, ones who ideally are owner occupiers and meet the sort of the income and the energy performance threshold. So yeah, if anyone has any ideas, then feel free to get in contact, but we are looking at a few options for that.
That's great. Many thanks, Ben. Are there any other items arising from the minutes? No? Great. Well, in that case, can I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting as documented in the meeting pack? Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is Have Your Say, and this is an opportunity for members of the public to come and speak to us and remind us about why we're all here. So I'd like to take Martin Pugh, who's joining us online, as our first speaker, please.
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me okay? Brilliant. Excellent. Yeah, I'm firstly going to have to apologize because I do have an urgent item. I know, Steph, you were keen to avoid those, but it is Middlewick that I'm talking about, probably no surprise. Firstly, I'd like to just double check that everyone has received the very important letter that was sent out by 17 experts, naturalists, on the 5th of January. If you haven't checked your inboxes, I mean, a lot of them maybe gone into spam and junk folders, but this is of crucial importance because this really debunks the foundation on which Middlewick was put erroneously in the local plan, basically on bad science, on the grounds of bad science. It's a very comprehensive letter. I'm not going to even attempt to summarize it here, but in a nutshell, if you had to encapsulate it, it states that Middlewick isn't only of county importance, but national importance. It has 1,480 invertebrate species, which is a staggering biodiversity hotspot, with 167 of those rare or threatened. The real treasure. And also importantly, Middlewick, from recent studies, now represents 10% or more of all acid grassland in Essex. And is in fact the largest open area of acid grassland in the county. And I think that level of county and national interest has just been, well, it hasn't been fully taken on board, which is, I think, why we're in this very dangerous situation with Middlewick on the local plan. So 5th of January letter, very important. Secondly, I was going to say there's a general, the points that I'm making are not attached to the agenda today, but in fact, it's very much related to the agenda, to your point 9, I think, where you talk about the climate and emergency action plan. And this is something which has been roundly overlooked, I think partly because Middlewick was rushed onto the local plan without the sustainability reviews, subject to other sites. Middlewick is an incredibly important carbon store, and the development, the ploughing up, the bulldozing, the paving over would release an astronomical amount of carbon. So I think we're aware of the biodiversity interest, but I think the carbon impact and the footprint hasn't been looked at. And I'd like to know, have there been any reports on the carbon footprint? We're talking about unlocking thousands of tons that are locked into the vegetation and also the animals that are sadly going to be decimated. Hundreds of bats and stoats and weasels, thousands of birds, tens of thousands of reptiles like lizards, slow worms, small mammals, millions of invertebrates. They're all carbon carrying, also, of course, living beings that will be decimated and displaced. Very, very few of them would be actually translocated. Thirdly, I wanted to talk about the very dangerous precedent. This is much bigger than Middlewick itself as one site, a cracking local wildlife site, one of the best in Colchester. We're also talking about the precedent that we're setting, the message we're sending to other local authorities and developers. And if you had to summarize that, it's really the message that local wildlife sites are fair game, that they're expendable. The paradox that to save a local wildlife site, you build on it. And I think that signaling open season on developing on local wildlife sites, whether it's smaller ones or larger ones, is incredibly dangerous.
Martin, excuse me, I'm just going to interrupt you for a
Yeah,
moment
sure,
there.
of course.
Purely because we do have the time constraints with this.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
Could if I give you maybe another half a minute, and then if you could sort of get to your kind of core point, or if you have
No
a question
problem.
that you'd like.
That should be
Thank you
plenty.
very
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Thanks. So we're also devaluing local wildlife sites and sending the message that using experimental, now debunked techniques like ploughing up of very valuable tall grassland to spread chemicals like sulfur on them, and disregarding local and national expert voices in favor of commercial consultants, which may very well have a bias, which I think has been shown through the now discredited Stantec report. I think the message on a county and national basis is incredibly dangerous if Middlewick development does go ahead. And the question I'd end with is, I think Middlewick ticks all of the boxes that you exist for as an environment and sustainability panel. The local campaign group has been doing the bulk of the heavy lifting the last 6 years and campaigning against it. So really, I suppose we'd like to throw down the gauntlet to you as a panel. What are you going to do to fight Middlewick now that the science has been debunked? And bearing in mind, as a local wildlife site, it should always have had a level of protection under the MPPF guidelines. And finally, we'd like to meet with you. We said this a number of times. As a group, we have the Colchester Natural History Society. Getting around a table and meeting on site, I think, is core to filling the information vacuum which has existed in the past. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your submission, and thank you for being succinct there.
Thank you.
In terms of the last panel meeting that the Environment and Sustainability panel had, there has been internal discussions about an additional ecological survey happening in the spring, and I'm going to hand over to Mel Rundle to speak a bit more about this.
Yeah, hi Martin. I think we responded this to you after the last meeting, but apologies if it hasn't reached you, because I think at the last meeting you were requesting an ecological report. I've since spoken to my planning colleagues who lead on the work in this area, and they've advised me that Colchester City Council have engaged with the Colchester Natural History Society to recommend an independent ecologist to provide a survey, and I've been told that this work is actually going to commence in the spring, and then of course the ecological report will be publicly available once completed. So I'm not sure if that got back to you, but that piece of work is going to happen in the spring.
I'd like to very quickly respond to that. Is that okay to have a brief?
To respond, Martin.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, we're aware and we appreciate a third-party ecologist, I think, to dispel the concern that there really has been a very heavy presumption towards development. Everything we've heard in the past, and we suspect the brief has been informed by that, was presuming, well, the development's going to happen. How can we make this fit? Our concern is now that the science behind the whole concept of trying to move the wildlife at Middlewick and dump it somewhere else, that's been completely discredited. Our concern is that another year of surveys will give developers an opportunity to jump in, purchase a site, sign deals, etc. We actually think the science is in, the data is in. We don't need further survey work, but what we would be keen on as an alternative, as a compromise, is seeing a desk-based work, bearing in mind Middlewick is one of the most surveyed sites in Colchester. A desk study reviewing the 20 experts and organisations, the hundreds of thousands of records we've got now, and comparing that to the very questionable Stantec report. That would save months and reduce the risk of development going ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and again, thank you for keeping that succinct as well.
Thank you.
Just in terms of that additional request there, in terms of considering what you're asking for a desk study there, I would be more than happy to pass that on to colleagues in the planning department and make that request. So thank you very much.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Next, I have Stephen Vince, please. Welcome back, Mr. Vince. So I'd ask you to stick to the 3 minutes, but I appreciate the previous speakers had slightly more. So if you can roughly keep it to that, and then you'll have a minute to respond after myself or officers respond to your comments. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Stephen Vince, a villager from West Mersey. Sorry to me appealing again for the city to come clean and obey the law. Third time lucky, perhaps. Regarding the city's unlawful practices, Village Green 241 South, Coast Road, West Mersey. Upholding and obeying the law is really the remit for the Chief Executive, Monitoring Officer, Leader of the Council, but these fugitives, like yourselves, will not respond, and they do not have the access to these key players. Perhaps you know where they hang out. Hence, I am back here. I've been told to fall in line and keep stum by city councillors, which is an obstruction of the justice. Trouble is, I'm not a crooked Colchester City criminal. Last time I attended court, as it happened, against a borough councillor's son, but that's beside the point. The judge said, "I find you a very honest man, Mr. Vince, so I cannot keep stum. And I do not want to do porridge by association of the city's profits of crime. As on Village Green, there is 16 illegal parking spaces, £10 a space, £160 a day, £1,000 a week, 50,000 a year, times 20 years, £1 million. 1 million, as the trotters would say, in only fools and horses. Lovely jubbly, one day we'll be millionaires. £1 million scam. Dalboy would not have the front for this dodgy deal and would say, you plonkers city. At least with the trotter scam, Peckham Springs, you received a bottle containing tap water. With the city scam, it's just daylight robbery. And if you don't pay up, you get roughed up by the city's enforcers, the parking partnership bullies. Since I first come here, another 20,000 has been trousered in illegal parking charges. There must be some straight councillors or whistleblowers amongst you. We all know it's been a very profitable con, a good earner, but the game's up. The Drake train hit the buffers. The city's been caught out. I need answers, and for this illegal practice to stop immediately, and the good name of the city restored. As the Three C's of Colchester City Council, to me, currently stand for corrupt corporate culture. And I'm asking for 3 C's, Colchester come clean. On the 21st of September 2023, I was told I'd receive a reply within a week. I know a week is a long time in politics, well it's currently 20 weeks long and still waiting. If this goes to court, the city's already scored an own goal for paying for signs stating its management of the green is unlawful. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vince. Lots for us to think about there, but I think what I'd start by saying is, in here, porridge is for breakfast, and no one in here is asking for you to keep stum. I give you my assurances on that. In terms of your concerns that you've raised about Colchester City councillors specifically asking you to be silent, I would really encourage you to address those formally to the monitoring officer. It's a man by the name of Mr. Weavers, Andrew Weavers.
Well, he doesn't answer. He wastes the time, right? He doesn't answer. I did say, you know,
if I might, sorry,
yeah,
if I might
carry on,
continue,
yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. In terms of the reply that was offered to you within 7 days, that was my assurance. I spent a lot of time chasing to make sure you had that, but unfortunately we didn't have an email address for you. So I asked Councillor Powling to provide contact details for you, and a visit to Mersey was then organised with Mel Rundle, Councillor Powling, and I believe yourself. I was unable to attend because I was unwell. So in terms of a response from that meeting, so you have had further interaction, and we would consider that to be a response. I would like to bring Mel in here because she's been interacting with you on this topic more, and I think this is for her to do, but thank you for your concerns.
Thanks. Good evening again, Mr. Vince. First thing I would like to say is I know you're very frustrated, but I would ask you to refrain from using the term bully when referring to officers who are carrying out their parking duties on behalf of the council.
Well, it's illegal.
So in terms of, obviously we came to see you at the end of last year and had a site meeting in regard to the Village Green.
Yeah.
You then came to the meeting, it was maybe January or December, I've lost track of time. I explained to you at the meeting that we are seeking external legal advice in relation to the Village Green and the concerns you've raised. As I think we described to you at the meeting when we came to Mersey, the car park that the Village Green you think is on at the moment has a shared income arrangement with Mersey Council. Councillor Powling then approached them on our behalf and said if we're going to seek legal advice at a cost, we would like them to share that cost with us because they share the income. He took that to the first meeting this year, which was a couple of weeks ago in January, and they have now agreed to part fund the legal advice to get a clarity on this situation. We've now instructed the solicitors with a suite of questions around the concerns you've raised and about our conducting business on the Village Green. And as soon as we have a response to that and a clear determination, I will be back in contact with you. I'm sorry it's taken longer and you are frustrated, but as I explained to you before, I picked this up being new to role, I've run with it and I will see it through to the end, but I just ask that you give us time to do it properly and formally.
We'll have to come to the next meeting.
Mr Vince, you've got a minute to respond to Mel's
Yeah,
comments
I mean,
there.
will I have to come to the next meeting or will you respond before then?
It depends how long the solicitors take to give us
Well,
the
it's been going on far too long. I mean, tomorrow, you'll be acting illegally tomorrow by charging people to use Village Green. You cannot charge people to use Village Green. It's illegal. And tomorrow, you'll be breaking the law again, like you was today, and you have been for weeks. You've got to stop breaking the law.
Okay, thank you very much for coming along, Mr
Thank
Vince.
you.
And I will also follow up with Mel in 7 days' time and make sure that action is happening. And if the solicitors aren't responding, I'll
Okay.
ask Mel to do a chase.
I don't want to come back to the next meeting. I'm sure you don't want me to come here. But,
You're always welcome, sir. Genuinely,
thank you
that's
very
why we're
much.
here. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Next, we have Alan Short, please. Alan, as you know, it's roughly 3 minutes, please. Then we'll respond and then you'll have a further minute. Thank you.
Good evening. I think most of you know me by now. I've come here not to talk about the evidence that Martin Pugh talked about, but to talk about form and power. This committee decided in December that consideration of the ecology, biodiversity and sustainability of Middlewick Ranges was appropriate to this committee. So why isn't this committee the one appointing the expert to do a review? Why isn't this committee laying down the terms of reference for that review, considering that subsequently review and then reporting directly to the planning committee? I have to say that the planning committee's major brief is not sustainability or environment or ecology or biodiversity. The planning committee's job is to find places to build houses. So first of all, I think that this committee should be playing the major role in managing that and in considering, and the committee should be making the recommendation to the local plan committee and not the local plan committee to itself. The second issue is a one of the letters and the information you've got. Before the council made its decision in 2022, of which 26 of 51 councillors voted in favour of the local plan, the number's quite significant. A letter was received from Natural England, who are in fact a statutory body, making their first comments on the inclusion of Middlewick Ranges in the plan. That letter was according to the local newspaper, received by Martin Goss, and in conjunction with Tim Young decided it would not be circulated to the councillors before the vote on the local plan. That issue I've asked the scrutiny committee to take up. But if you want that letter, you can only get it by asking for it. And I suggest that the officer for this committee gets a copy of that letter and circulates it to everybody around this table. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Sorry, I was scribbling some notes there in order to respond. In terms of the recommendations, within the terms of remit that the panel currently has, which are what we have to operate within, I will be very happy as chair to pass these concerns on to Cabinet, to attend the planning committee and to speak to those as well. I will also speak to the relevant portfolio holders and make sure that those comments and concerns are passed on to them as well. However, generally speaking as chair, I try not to take a view on things. I try to ensure that my role is to facilitate an effective meeting. But I do feel as an elected councillor that enhanced powers for this panel and the policy panel would be of benefit to Colchester. At this present time, the Environment and Sustainability panel can only make recommendations to Cabinet. how wonderful it would be if we were a full committee with full council approving giving this panel committee status and enhanced powers to make recommendations to our other internal bodies. Now, I appreciate that's not an item on the agenda this evening, and I'm not formally moving it. Please don't worry, colleagues, but I think that is something that we really ought to look at, certainly before the end of the municipal year. Alan, you've got a minute to come back to that if you wish to.
Yes, thank you very much. I saw one or two heads nodding around the table, so perhaps the rest of your colleagues on this committee may be with you on this issue. I hope that's so. I think that it's very easy for the local planning committee to get into a sort of strategy. We do need housing in Colchester. We desperately need housing in Colchester. Nobody campaigns more than I do, but we also need to make sure that we're not building on valuable land that in 2041, which we're asked to comment on at the moment, we will regret the 2,500 houses built on the Middlewick Ranges. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Okay, last on the list of Have Your Say speakers this evening is Kamal. Please approach the table. You've got just over 3 minutes, but again, I'm willing to be a bit flexible on that in light of other speakers, and then we'll respond to you and you'll have a further minute to respond after that. Thank you.
Hello, good evening everyone. My name is Kemal and tonight I'm here as Policy Development Officer of Colchester Greens. Firstly, I would like to thank Council for successfully running the 3-year project this year as well, and allowing residents to get free trees and shrubs. As a keen allotment goer, this project and time of the year is particularly exciting for me. However, before I continue my speech and share observations, I would like to ask following questions. What engagements and contributions did Environment Committee play in this year's project, and what contributions and meetings did panel have with Woodland and Biodiversity Project? On Trees for Years page, it is claimed that the council will be giving 10,000 free native trees, shrubs, fruit and fruit bushes. However, this claim is wrong. None of the shrubs being offered are native, and what's worse, they do not have wildlife value that one would expect. According to RHS, Forsythia intermedia is an ornamental and non-native plant. On its RHS profile, this plant has no value to wildlife section, and I couldn't find this non-native and hybrid plant's value to wildlife. According to BBC Gardener's World, this shrub is a vigorous one and has no particular known value to wildlife in the UK. I repeat, no known particular value to wildlife in the UK. Yet on the Trees of the Year 2024 guide published by Council is falsely claiming that this shrub is a special attracts bees, beneficial.
Sorry, could you slow down? You're going a bit fast.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yet on the Trees for Years 2024 guide published by Council, it is falsely claimed that this shrub especially attracts bees, beneficial insects, birds, butterflies, and moths. Compared to common dogwood, which is native to England and Wales, neither Cornus alba sibirica nor Cornus flaviramea are native plants. While Siberian dogwood and yellow dogwood looks visually appealing to human eyes, they are non-native. According to Gardener's World, neither of these shrubs attract beneficial insects, butterflies, moths, or other pollinators. If Council is giving away trees and bushes as part of Woodland and Biodiversity Project, then it must prioritize and pay greater value on plants' wildlife value and educating residents too. While Woodland Trust is running huge restoration projects to replace non-native trees and plants with no to little value to wildlife with native species, Our council does not have the luxury to spend residents' taxes and give away non-native bushes that have insignificant wildlife value. A further question would be, what did the panel provide, or why did it not review and make interventions to hold relevant council body accountable? Last time, Woodland and Sustainability Project website reviewed was back in 3rd of December 2021. According to Council's own Our Green Fingered supporters, 0 trees was planted by any of the supporters, and again last time this page was reviewed was back in 17th of December 2020. Tree Guardians page was reviewed back in 3rd of September 2021.
Kamal, if I could ask you to sort of wind it up in the next 30 seconds.
Yes,
Thank
sure.
you.
I mean, I'm just, and back in September 2019, I registered myself as a tree guardian. However, since then, I only received one email informing me about tree planting dates, and I have received no information about when days will take place to look after trees. And lastly, according to an article authored by Colchester City Council and published on Local Government Information Unit, 68,000 trees has been planted since 2019. According to an article published on 28th of September 2023 entitled Colchester Woodland Project Left City with a Load of Dead Twigs, Council admitted that although they do not know for sure, around 30% of all trees planted were dead. This is despite the fact that Council received extra funding to look after and monitor planted trees. And one very last comment. I noticed that in Council's relevant page, the language used for woodland and biodiversity project, it suggests that it's now entering its final stage, but so far they only planted 68,000 and they pledged to plant 200,000. So that's also a question. Thank you very much for giving me the extra time. Thank you.
No, that's fine, Kamal, and thank you for your submission. Sorry to have to move you along. I've taken a lot of notes. I am going to hand over to officers momentarily, but just in terms of the panel intervening, this panel doesn't have the power to intervene in decisions because if you think about what I was saying previously, we can make recommendations to Cabinet, but we cannot stop Cabinet doing something. We cannot stop a portfolio holder from doing something. There are other mechanisms, but this panel does not have those powers. However, I think, oh, you okay? Okay, no, it's fine, just checking you're all right. So that's a really quick response on that particular point. In terms of the 68,000 trees that have been planted since 2019, the original Woodland and Biodiversity Project was a 5-year project, and that 5 years is now coming to an end. However, there is an extension on that. I'm going to hand over to Mel now, and I think what I'd say is there were a lot of excellent data in there, and I wish everyone did that much research before making a submission. So if you have that in writing, it would be really, really useful if you could email it in, and then we can kind of go through it with a fine-tooth comb and make sure we're responding on all of the points you've raised there. It sounds as though there's been some website pages that haven't been updated, so I'm also going to get that looked into, and I'm going to shut up now and hand over to Mel.
Thanks. To be honest, Steph, I think you've said most of what I was going to say. So firstly, thank you for your interest and your passion in the subject. I am by no means green-fingered, so a lot of what you said went over my head, quite frankly. But I will speak to the relevant team. If we could have a written copy of your submission, absolutely, in terms of checking the websites, but also in terms of, you know, that we do have specialists within the service. So we are led by them, and they obviously speak to organisations such as the Environment Agency and others. So we can get that checked, and any any feedback that you have will feed through to the team, because the Trees for Years, as you say, it's a really well received project. It's a funded project, but ultimately, if the concerns you've raised are that it's not achieving what we want it to achieve, then we will of course have to look at where our data and our evidence is coming from. So if you can submit via Matthew, I think you've got his email, all of your concerns, and then we'll respond to you directly.
Thanks, Mel. Kamal, you've got a minute if you want to come back on any of that.
Not on, well, you mentioned that you as committee, you can make recommendations. So were there any reviews and recommendations by the committee about the plants and trees that were picked? That's the question.
That's a really good question. That predates my time in council, because that would have been around 2018, 2019 when the Woodland and the Biodiversity Project began. But I would be more than happy to go away and find out that information and revert to you on that. Pardon me, Councillor Lissamore, please come in.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for coming today. I just wanted to say very quickly that this has already been questioned, I know, a couple of years ago with some of the planting that went ahead in Lexton, where we believed up to 90% of plants had actually died. So I think there's some work that's already been done, and hopefully we're in a better position than we were then when they were first planted. But thank you for coming. But I know some work should have already been done.
That's music to my ears. Thank you very much, Councillor Lissamore, and I'll dig that out. Councillor Ellis, please.
Just a very quick one. I've already questioned Jess Rosedale about the inclusion of things like Forsythia in the list, because I've said I'll go and help on the day, I think in Mark's Tay, giving out the trees, and question that, because there's loads of evidence that says Forsythia is non-native. Not only is it non-native, it doesn't produce nectar or pollen or what have you. It's no good whatsoever for wildlife or for pollinators. And she came back claiming that it was, and the Wildlife Trust say that it is. And actually, I looked up online and found that the Wildlife Trusts do include it as a plant that is useful in the spring, whereas every other organisation doesn't. So you might want to have a little word with them, given your role within the Greens, and see where they're coming from. But it was frustrating that it countered my argument, saying to her that we shouldn't be including it. It's something that we've included for a number of years, apparently, and it's been very popular. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, and I think actually we should have some input, if we could, into what trees are used in our Trees for Years, which has been going for a very long time, much longer than the Woodland and Biodiversity Project.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. Kamal, I'm going to break protocol and invite you to come back for another minute if there's anything you'd like to say in response to the councillors' contributions.
I believe I don't have any other questions. Yeah, I mean, like I said, according to an article that was published back in September on Colchester Gazette, there was claim that council received extra funding to look after and monitor the planted trees and have a good knowledge about their status of well-being, but they were on. Hello? Council was saying they don't actually have any data about monitoring and well-being of the trees, even though they receive funding for it. But yeah, I will send an email with all the details. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you, panel, for such an interactive discussion as well. It's much appreciated. So that brings us to the end of our Have Your Say section. I have had a request for a 5-minute comfort break intermission a bit earlier than the usual time. I am willing to grant that, so can I ask that we come back in 5 minutes, please, panel? And thank you all for attending this evening.
audio check with you, please. Mark, can we have a quick audio check with you, please?
Yeah, no problems. I can hear you.
That's perfect. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Welcome back to this Environment and Sustainability Panel meeting on the evening of Thursday, the 8th of February, 2024. We're still live in the Grand Jury Room at Colchester Town Hall. We now have item 7 is next on our agenda, and I'm going to ask the panel to consider a report outlining the key initiatives, improvements, and future plans to enhance the sustainability and improvements in Colchester City Council's housing stock energy performance. I'd like to invite Mark Wicks, Interim Director of Assets for CBH, who is attending online, to introduce the item, and then we're going to have a good chat about it. Thank you all.
Hello there, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. I'd just like to quickly share my screen, if I may.
We're just going to adjust the volume to make it a little bit louder.
Okay. Can you see the presentation now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark, we can see that.
Oh, okay, you can see the presentation. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, the main points I'd like to point out from the report are our EPC and progress with our EPC and SAP ratings. So, since 2021, we've managed to increase our average SAP rating across the housing stock from a score of 75.02 to 75.71. Brief graph there shows how that's kind of progressed over this period of time. The initial peak that you see there is due to the data load on the system that we use to record this. And generally our housing stock is in a very good position. We have 86.3% of our properties currently with an EPC rating of C or above, compared to the benchmark standard from the National Federation of ALMOs of 72% of our kind of peers. And then moving on to our reduction in CO2 emissions, again over the same period, we've reduced the emissions by an average of 55 kilograms per property annually, which again is a good result against a benchmark using the software that I mentioned, Parity Portfolio, which shows against our peers are around, it's about 22 kilos lower. Sorry. Then in terms of further planned improvements, so we will achieve continued improvements through the current capital program. During this current year, we've increased 1% of the stock reaching the minimum of EPCC through the capital program alone. And in addition to that, we've got the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund project, which we will upgrade significantly 105 properties between now and summer of 25. And we're also running our sister project to that, which uses the same specification for the works to a further 25 properties. We're carrying out works that allow us to monitor how our properties are performing, and obviously work closely with our customers to make sure that they're getting the best out of the systems installed to their properties. The main the main method is a switchy device, which is a smart thermostat. This has the potential to reduce energy consumption by up to 15% in a property through education, enhanced control, monitoring, etc. It monitors how the home performs and detects issues early on, so it allows us to resolve any problems that we might have within the stock. So this is currently being run as a trial, so it's around about 10% of the properties. 600 homes will receive these. As of the point where I produced this report, there was 159 properties which have had these installed, and they're active. And then final point is just I'd like to raise is on wildflower areas and tree planting. So there's been 3 wildflower areas created on housing revenue account land, and they're having a positive impact on local wildlife. Also, during the winter of 22-23, 30 trees were planted, and there's an additional 50 trees that are planned through future schemes. Okay, I'll just pass over for any questions then. Stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Mark. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the panel for that presentation, also for your report, and I'd like to invite Councillor Summers to raise her query. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, I think it's absolutely fantastic that we're above the national average at 86.3% properties rating of C or above. I'd quite like to find out, though, exactly what number of properties are in each band. Is that possible?
Yes, yeah, that's possible. I can share that after the meeting. That's fine. I can forward that on. Yeah, we're able to see that. We monitor it. I mean, the majority of our properties, I can tell you off the top of my head, which is just over 3,000, are in band C, which is quite consistent with the age and style of properties, in truth. But yeah, so we have a small number in Bs and As, and a small number in Ds and Es.
That's great. Thanks very much, Mark. Councillor Gocher, I think I saw a hand at the end.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark, well, both Marks, for getting back to us after the question I asked in the briefing about the wildflower sites. And I see the pictures are on the slides there. It looks like some really good work's being done. Just a couple of quick questions. First of all, can you just kind of clarify for me what housing revenue account land actually is? And secondly, in terms of identifying sites for potential wildflower gardens or tree planting, is that something ward councillors can interact with you on, recommending areas, or how is that determined? Thank you.
Okay, so the HRA land is generally defined as where our estates, properties are, etc. So any area that's maintained through that as makes up part of that portfolio and is maintained through that account. Yeah, I can forward that request to Mark Briggs, who manages that work in terms of input for identification of areas. I'm happy to do that.
Thanks, Mark. Any other query? Pardon me, Councillor Warnes.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mark. It's a broadly welcome report, and great to see the progress that the Council's arm's length management organisation is making. I've got a couple of comments. Under 333 hard standings, you talk about the impact of a more labour-intensive approach now that glyphosate isn't being used in order to keep down the weeds, and then it goes on to say, however, the contractor has now conducts fewer visits each year. So I just wanted to know whether the increase in the additional operative to try and keep on top of having to manually weed hard standings has been cancelled out by the contractor not actually visiting regularly. Hopefully not, but if it is, then obviously it would be nice to know what CBH intends to do to get the desired effect that may not now be happening. On 3335 mulching programs, I mean, just an observation I have. I mean, I can appreciate what it is that you're trying to do, and it all makes sense. But I'm seeing many shrub borders beginning to look like weed borders, and certainly I appreciate there is to be a change in the way we are managing them for all of the ecological reasons given, and we should expect to see more bark, but I'm certainly flagging up areas where I'm seeing less shrubs and more weeds. So I need to have some kind of quality control assurance there that that we don't end up losing the shrubs that we've had and end up just creating bark beds as a way of sort of keeping down the weeds. And the third one was a more sort of technical, well, not so much technical, but in terms of the way that we might manage such an introduction of being able to control the actual thermostats. So customers can do that remotely through their phones at any time, anywhere, at any time of the day through the Switchy program. Just would like CBH to think about a situation that hopefully is very unlikely to happen, but should it happen, that the means to do that becomes a use of what is called coercive control over somebody, and the way that the council as a managing, CBH as a managing agent might well respond to that, and that might be having to fund an immediate injunction in order to actually stop it. But I think we should be alive to that, and hopefully something like that wouldn't happen where somebody being kept in the cold in order to actually coerce somebody might actually happen. So just something to actually think about. So if such a situation did happen, CBH is in a position to know how it would react to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Warnes. I think that's a really, really useful contribution, and it's great to see you go into that level of detail there. So, Mark, are you comfortable to respond to Councillor Warnes' points on that, please?
Thank you, Chair. On the points you raised around the planting, the mulching, etc., I'll need to refer back on that one to Mark, please, because I'm not actively involved with that area of work, so I can get the responses from him. On the switchy devices, yeah, I think it's a good point. We're not, for the most part, the devices are what are being used within the property, so that all the control of the system is via that device, which is generally mounted in our customer's hallway, or wherever's appropriate within the home. There is an option to control it via an app, and it's one of the things that that has come to our attention, because there's always also the case where if somebody moves out of the property, they shouldn't have the right to be able to access that once they move on to another property. So that is essentially everything that can be dealt with through technology, working with the company switching. That essentially that can be killed remotely, so that control wouldn't occur. But I do take your point about where you've got the potential for coercive control. We have a portal where we're able to monitor the use of these systems, so we would be able to flag up where the target temperature is being reduced significantly, and that will raise other warnings about the time to heat on properties, etc. So yeah, I think it would be flagged quite quickly, if that kind of thing was going on, and we could obviously sensitively pass that on to our colleagues in housing management.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mark. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick ones. One is just on benchmarking. Mark, you talked about benchmarking against other ALMOs. I was looking up the National Federation of ALMOs. I think there are 19, it says. Are there only 19 now, or are there more than that? There were at one point about 70. Then I thought there were about 30. This is talking about 19. And why do we only benchmark against those, or do we benchmark against registered providers as well? And if we don't, why don't we? Just of interest. I think Martin has brought up the point about hard surfaces that I've also written down. That 333 hard surfaces paragraph doesn't seem to tell me anything. I've put, so what does this actually tell me? It tells me that things are bad, then they're better, and now they're bad again. So it would be helpful actually to have an answer on that. When I was portfolio holder for housing, actually my next door neighbour here this evening asked me questions about the use of glyphosate. And I know that Colchester Borough Homes was still using it at the time, and I had to tell him that, but it was being phased out. In paragraph 335, it says, while alternative methods are being explored, such as mechanical weed control, the transition away from glyphosate requires careful planning and ongoing adjustments to ensure effective weed management across all estates. That transition suggests it's still being used. So is it still being used? And are we transitioning away from it, or have we stopped using it? Wood chip, I've picked up a slightly different point, is I'm assuming we're using old rotted wood chip, not new wood chip. Otherwise you'll be killing the plants in your borders if you're doing it. Wildflower areas, again, plans are underway to replicate this model across all estates to enhance biodiversity. I welcome that. I'm very keen on tree planting and wildflowers. I just wonder what the costs involved. Have you looked at sponsorship for that? What are the costs involved? Wildflower planting, if you're doing it properly, and not just letting, as the City Council has in some places, let rewilding take place. We call it wilding, but actually a lot of residents think it's just leaving things to go to rack and ruin. I like it personally, but I know others don't. I just wonder what we're doing around that. And also, just on the tree planting, it looked to me in the slides like you're planting sort of semi-mature trees, as in several-year-old trees, because they're staked and larger. Again, size of trees that you're putting in and what the ongoing management and cost is of using those. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ellis. Mark, can I ask you to respond on that, please?
Okay, so again, yeah, I'll need to come back on the majority of those. I can apologies. Transition was a bit misleading. No, it's not being used anymore. We've stopped using it, so I can confirm that. And again, on 3.3.3, it was, I think the point there was just to explain that it's a challenge, but we are dealing with it and working through it. So again, yeah, I can provide some further clarification on that. So on the benchmarking, we don't generally benchmark against other registered providers. We did participate in a Housemark study a couple of years ago as well, and there was a similar kind of outcome that, you know, the majority of the participants in there tended to have a lower number of properties compared to ourselves that were at EPC and above. But it's something that we could consider benchmarking against registered providers.
That's great. Many thanks, Mark. Councillor Arnold, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Mark, just asking about the switchy thermostats. I take it they're very similar to the Hive. Other smart thermostats obviously are available. And on this pilot project, how long is it for? And what would be considered it to be successful for it to be rolled out to all the rest of the properties?
So They are similar in some ways, but what they provide is they provide a number of passive sensors as well within the device. So they don't collect any personal data, but they do tell us a great deal about how the property's performing. And one of the things that we can also do is receive a flag or an indicator that the property is at risk of damp and mould. We can also communicate with our customers via the devices. You can send them simple questionnaires and get responses via those. In terms of the 600, so there was funding obtained to fit the 600. We identified properties which we felt were most appropriate. Those are based on the geographical area in terms of where people are most likely to be at risk of fuel poverty. And the 105 properties that we're retrofitting, obviously we're carrying out a great deal of retrofit works to improve the energy performance of those. We want to get those 105 properties with these devices so that we can measure the time to heat, etc., those kind of things after the retrofit works are carried out, so that it will help us monitor the success of the works that have been, or the measures that have been applied to the properties. In terms of rolling them out further, I think it is discussions that we've been having with the council, and we would ideally like to get them in every property, and we've got within our project initiation document, we've got set criteria, things that we would like to be able to see in terms of, you know, how successful the project is. But early indication is with the kind of data that we're getting back from the devices and the means of communicating with our customers, which tend to be a lot more successful than going out via other methods of questionnaires, we do feel that they're a good prospect.
That's really, really helpful, Mark. Thank you very much. Councillor Ellis, did I miss a hand from you with a supplementary question?
I've almost forgotten what it was, but now I've remembered. It was just, again, going back to 333. I'm assuming you're not operating in a vacuum, because Colchester have got the same issues, whether it's CBH or our own ground care teams. I'm assuming that you're all doing the work together rather than double doing it. And I'm getting a nodding head, so that's fine. It would just seem stupid to do it separately.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis, and I agree about the efficiency. Makes sense. Councillor Cox, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. I'd just like to push a little on the SAP scores in paragraph 3.12. Oh no, apologies, is it that one? It's more close now. 1.4. Yes, 3.14. Average SAP score has increased across housing stock from 75.02 to 75.71 since 2021. And that doesn't seem to be a very large jump to me. What are the levers at your disposal or our collective disposal to push that up, given that energy efficient homes are a key way for us to actually reach our net zero target? Thanks.
Mark, if you can come back on that.
Yeah, so that increases across the whole 6,000 properties. So obviously we were at a high starting point. So 75 is above your EPC SAP comes in from 69, the SAP score of 69. So we're already at a high starting point, and obviously across the whole stock, that does look like a small increase, but when you take into account that it's across like 6,000 properties, it's a measure, but it's the more important measure is to get all of our properties where it's feasible above 69, which is considered as an EPC and a reasonable level of energy efficiency.
Okay, panel, have we got any more questions, comments?
Just on that point, rather than doing it as a percentage, wouldn't it be more useful to give us an actual number of houses that or homes that you're bringing up to a higher rating, so that we know? If you're saying it's across 6,000, but obviously quite a number had already started at above 69, would it not be worth telling people where they were the ones that were below 69 and how many you've actually brought up to above the 69 level? That would be more useful for me than just seeing, as Councillor Cox has said, a small percentage increase across the board. From my point of view, I'd find that interesting. I don't know if others would, but that would be more useful.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. I've actually just scribbled a hasty note on that to Mel, because I think that is something that I should also take responsibility for as chair. I had the papers ahead of time. I should have picked up on the lack of really clear statistic there. So my apologies, everyone, for that. But we'll make sure that the it's not the median data. Someone
It isn't. It is. Yeah, sorry, it is.
Oh, it's the actual number itself, but I'm trying to find a posh word that means the number itself. The number itself. Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. Thank you, keeping it real as always. No, that's a valuable point. Thank you. And I'd just like to make a couple of really brief observations, Mark, if I may. 3.14, as Councillor Cox has identified, we have got that commendable progress. That's a good sign to see. Let's keep it going. 3.15, I think it's really positive, as Councillor Summers alluded to. I keep going to use people's first names this evening. The fact that we have got a higher we are surpassing the national average, but again, I'd love to see us setting a target to aim for there. And in terms of on 3.3.1, the additional designated recycling areas is great, and the additional properties with recycling provisions and bicycle provisions, I think these are all really, really good steps forward. But let's think, perhaps not this evening, but perhaps we can think about how we can ensure that we're continuing in these directions, making sure that those goals are really quantified. There you go, that's the word I was looking for, and ensure that we're going in the right direction on this, rather than going, okay, we've made some progress and allowing it to stagnate. And it's fantastic news to hear that glyphosate isn't being used at this time, although I appreciate the other issues it is generating. So I'm going to ask the panel to move on to item 8 now, which is the next meaty item on our agenda this evening, and that is the City Council Fleet Transition Strategy. I swear the words have been put together this evening to encourage me to trip over my tongue. You've got within your meeting packs a report which sets out the new fleet transition strategy, which sets out a pathway for Colchester to transition, for God's sake, to a zero tailpipe emission fleet, which shows the requirements needed, including infrastructure, personnel and capital investment. And I'm more than happy to hand over to Rosa now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have a colleague online as well, Peter, who's from the Energy Savings Trust, who has formally helped us devise our fleet transition strategy, and is here to answer any technical questions that the panel may have. But basically, you've got quite a lengthy, quite detailed strategy document there in your pack. This agenda item is proposing a revised Colchester City Council strategy to transition our fleet to a carbon neutral status by 2030. And that's to align with our commitment to address the climate emergency, replacing our diesel and petrol vehicles with either electric, hydrogen or low emission alternatives in the future. The report sets out that the council is recognising that the environmental impact of our fleet does account for about 25% of total emissions, and therefore we do need to have some emphasis and look at the sustainability of our fleet asset management. So what officers are asking the panel to do, following and subject to your discussions on this item, is to recommend to Cabinet that this strategy is approved and adopted by the council. So I'm just going to quickly as possible, just give you some headlines from that strategy, because I appreciate it's quite a lengthy document. But basically, the fleet transition strategy is establishing some key objectives. 4 key objectives, which is around ensuring assets are fit for purpose, that we are promoting safety, that we're optimising asset usage, and we are prioritising sustainability. The strategy sets out aspirations to transition its entire current fleet to greener, lower emission vehicles, as I say, no later than 2030. And to achieve this goal, the strategy establishes specific objectives. It's about making effective and robust informed decisions on what that new fleet will look like. Ensure efficient and effective fleet management. improve and future-proof service delivery, and enhance fleet performance. And the principles are set out in the strategy, underscoring the Council's commitment to systematic and data-driven approach, making sure that we're emphasising the importance of informed decision-making, financial prudence and expert guidance throughout the transition to a greener fleet. So the report further recognises that the market around EV in particular and electric vehicles and that marketplace is evolving at quite a pace. And therefore it's emphasising the need for infrastructure development and investment to support any transition to EV. But there are challenges such as charging infrastructure capacity and funding. So the document highlights the current state of the Council's EV charging infrastructure, and it addresses the additional requirements for transitioning its entire fleet, with a focus on refuse collection trucks, which is more challenging than other smaller vehicles. To accommodate the transition of moving our refuse trucks, for example, to electric power, it does outline that an electrical substation might be deemed necessary. So the document does suggest alternative options like thinking about on-site battery storage, charging at other council sites, and as a last resort, upgrading the site capacity. But it does emphasise the importance of careful monitoring and data collection so that we can estimate what future demand will be. The strategy also looks at alternative fuels. So it discusses the viability and the benefits of using hydro-treated vegetable oil, so HVO, as an alternative replacement for fuel, for diesel. But additionally, it also explores the concerns and considerations related to HVO as a drop-in fuel. So the document, for example, emphasises how, as a renewable fuel, it's got good sustainable credentials. There are claims that there are net greenhouse gas CO2 emissions reductions of about 90%, which is quite significant in terms of reducing tailpipe emissions. And there are approvals from national organisations, including manufacturers like Volvo. And in addition to that, the document provides some real-world examples of how the CO2 emissions have been reduced through a trial that the Council has undertaken on HVO. But to balance this, the document also highlights concerns about the source of HVO in terms of principal feedstock, so used cooking oil, and the issues related to sustainability assurance, traceability of used cooking oil origin, and the potential distortions in the world market are raised. In terms of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, there's some insight from the Energy Savings Trust into those types of vehicles. And the report sets out and addresses their suitability for refuse-type collection fleet. While acknowledging potential benefits, such as rapid refuelling and zero harmful air emissions, the document also outlines several concerns, such as higher energy consumption, lower efficiency and higher costs, lack of cost savings, technical complexity, and lack of infrastructure. The report also does outline potential costs for things like refuse collection vehicles and vans, depending on all those different fuel types that I've talked about. And that's presented within a table highlighting the financial considerations involved in transitioning to those different types of fuel vehicles. So in conclusion, the document sets out three main options for the Council to consider when at the point of considering replacing fleet or adding to its fleet. So first off, obviously looking at a full transition to electric vehicles, which will align with our climate emergency action plan, but will require significant capital investment. The second option is hydro-treated vegetable oil as a stopgap, so using it as an interim measure until we reach full zero tailpipe emissions in the future, or continue as business as usual, continue running our current fleet and replacing vehicles with the latest Euro engine diesel versions upon renewal. Whilst that will be short-term cost effective, it doesn't quite align with our climate emergency action plan. So to confirm, the panel are not being asked to confirm the option to be taken forward, but these are options that are set out within the strategy to provide guidance for the current council at the point when replacement or additions to the fleet are being considered and sets the direction of travel. The strategy sets out that informed and considered decisions will need to be made at that point, supported by a business case before commitment is made to replacing or purchasing new fleet in the future. So in summary, the document is emphasising the Council's commitment to reducing carbon emissions and transitioning to lower emissions fleets, but acknowledging the ongoing development in green vehicle technology and that a measured approach must be taken, acknowledging the need for significant funding and the challenges posed by limited capital allocations. So now I ask the panel, following and subject to your discussions on this particular item, to recommend to Cabinet that this strategy, subject to any changes or additions that you'd like to recommend, is approved and adopted by the Council. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rosa. That's absolutely excellent. So, panel, just to reiterate, as Rosa has requested, we are looking at this strategy as a whole, and we do have the option of proposing any amendments this evening. However, before I open the floor in that sense, I'd like to reiterate a couple of really, really important points within the report that's provided to you. On page 35, it states, demands exceeding available financial resources, the need for a robust replacement plan is essential to prioritise replacements based on necessity. Keep the economic factors in mind, please. The other item is on page 36. We are not here to second guess what future technology will emerge within the marketplace. So I just ask you to bear in mind, this is about where we are at this moment in time and the remit of this panel. And with that in mind, I'd like to turn the floor over to Councillor Lissamore, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those pointers. Evening, Rosa. I'm first of all very interested in some of the words that have been used here, and I seem to see, I would say almost for the first time I've seen it, less tailpipe emissions. Now, I haven't particularly seen that before in a policy document from the Council, so I wondered if you could just explain, please, why the wording has been changed to include that. Secondly, I'm very concerned, and we spoke about this earlier on in the municipal year, where there is nothing here that I can see at all that is talking about the production of the batteries and the methods that are used to mine the chemicals that are needed within the batteries. And also, as far as I can see, there is nothing on here to say what we do with the batteries once they are defunct. Okay, the recycling properties of those batteries and what we do and how we get rid of them. That concerns me, that really does, because what I spoke about, as I say, earlier in the municipal year, is that we should have the full picture from beginning to end. Now, obviously, a diesel-engined vehicle does have chemicals involved. It does have a production line which does produce pollutants. However, what we have heard at other meetings is that the mining, particularly of the chemicals for some of these batteries, are unethical. They involve child labour, slave labour. You know, it is not a good production line in some cases. And I think we need to have a full picture here. We also need to have a full picture on what happens after the battery is defunct. What happens to those chemicals? How are they recycled? How are they extracted? What do we do with those batteries once they are defunct? I think we need to have a full picture. With regards to the economies on this, again, the thing that really concerns me is we're asking here to give Cabinet a steer, but I don't think we're being given the full picture. And again, and please excuse me if it's in the document because I couldn't see it, but I have been given a figure in the past about how much it will cost to build the substation at the Shrub End site. Now, it is said here that the last resort would be for officers who work for the council to take the vehicle home and go and charge them at home. I can see that, you know, if you've got a small a vehicle, but if you've got a dust cart, that's slightly more difficult. But I do not think that we have got the full picture here and how much the costings would be and how much work has actually got to be done to actually fulfill our strategy. How can I make a recommendation to Cabinet when I'm not seeing that full picture? I need to see, if we go down this route and we do this, do we have enough supply? And if we don't, how much is it going to be to build that substation? And is it going to be at Shrub End? If not, is it going to be elsewhere? Or have we got to build 2, or have we got to build 3? You know, I need to know that full picture, because it's no good going full belt into electric vehicles to then say, oh, actually, we're really struggling with the capacity to charge them. And we know technology will, I'm sure, get better on that, but I think we need to see the full picture. And I certainly, as things stand at the moment, cannot make any recommendations on this at all until I know the full picture. Thank you.
No, that's really, really comprehensive, and thank you for being so candid with your concerns there, Councillor Lissamore. Rosa, I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond, but I think as a really key point of being reminded there, thank you, Councillor Sue. Thank you, Councillor Lissamore. The whole life cycle really is something that we do need to be exploring in as a council, but also particularly in this panel and in our paperwork. But enough from me, Rosa.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, some really good points. I'll try and cover some aspects of this. I'm also going to call on colleagues, so Simon Davison's online, to pick some of these aspects up, and also, as I said, Peter from the Energy Savings Trust to add any additional expertise to this conversation. So just if I can take your last point first in terms of the strategy. The strategy itself is more about setting a direction than fully committing us to completely going all electric with all fleet, because the strategy itself is setting out that marketplace around the development of the technology is moving at such a rapid rate. But we are not in a position where we would feel comfortable as officers to make a recommendation that we move to EV for refuse collection vehicles. It just doesn't meet our operational needs and demand from what we've seen already. So what this strategy is doing is trying to set out as I say, a way forward, so that at the point where we're having to replace our vehicles, and there is a life cycle of our vehicles, we are using all of the data that we have available to us, both internally in terms of fleet usage, driver behaviour, and any other data and analytics, and then looking at the marketplace and doing that the research at that point in time, because in 2-3 years' time the marketplace will be evolving even further, and doing a really detailed business case, using this as a guidance document in terms of what options could be available to us, to make the council be in a position where it's making an informed decision about what the most appropriate way forward. Because you're quite right, if we were to go completely electric for all of our fleet, and it was all to operate out of Shrub End, then yes, a substation would be ultimately what we would probably need to look at. But there are alternatives, so such as the different types of fuel usage, different types of fuel, for example, and alternative ways of connecting to the electric infrastructure. So it's about making informed decisions at the point where we need to, but with having some direction to guide the council. So just as a reassurance, we're not setting out that we're asking you to make a recommendation to council that we go for EV, but at least have a way of being able to move forward towards a 2030, but setting out really clearly we've got to understand what the business case needs to be. Yeah.
Just come very quickly, just on that point, I think we still need to know a tipping point. And that didn't come out to me in the document, that we need to know to what either percentage of vehicles that the council are running, or the number of vehicles that we're running, about when a new substation would be needed, or any other long-term severe finance infrastructure would be needed. So I think we do sort of almost need like a tipping point. Thank you.
Okay, understood. All right, thank you. In terms of batteries, manufacturing and recycling and disposal, etc. Peter, is that something that you can share your expertise on?
Possibly, yes. Sorry, can you hear me okay, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, with regard to, the production of them or the recycling, did you say?
Both, production and recycling, please.
Okay, with regard to production, if you go back a few years, 5 years, something like that, there was a lot of concern about the rare trace minerals that are produced in batteries coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo was the most commonly used example. That used to appear in the press and that kind of thing. I think the motor manufacturers have moved on a bit from those days, and a lot of these rare trace minerals, things like lithium and cadmium, these kind of minerals, come from lots of other places as well, places like Chile and Australia and various other countries. I think if you're a motor manufacturer, the last thing you want is your image, your corporate social responsibility being badly affected by images of unsustainable mineral extraction. So I think a lot of the motor manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers, have done a lot in terms of ensuring that their components and their materials come from the right places, shall we say. I should point out as well, I think someone said it earlier, that a lot of the materials that we're talking about, things like cadmium and lithium and so on, are used in things like selective catalytic reduction equipment on internal combustion engine vehicles. They go into lean NOx traps, plus they go into things like the 12-volt batteries that we all have in our cars and vans and so on. So they do appear elsewhere in other things that we use. With regard to recycling, there are battery recycling centres, although there are a growing number of places now where batteries from electric vehicles that are no longer on the road are being used for storage. So in other words, the battery becomes old, it becomes degraded in terms of its ability to hold charge, but it still has a use. And there are an increasing number of places now, certainly there are some in the UK now, where you can use these pieces of kit to actually store electricity in. And so we're seeing a lot of that going on as well. So those are the kind of things that are happening in the world of battery recycling. I can't sit here and say what happens to every single part of every battery that is, that reaches its end of life, but generally that's what's going on at the moment.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you very much, Peter. I'd like to bring in Simon Davison, who's joining us online as well. Thanks, Simon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Simon Davison, Sustainability Climate Change Manager. I think that was picked up really well with regards to the electric vehicle waste stream, and just to reiterate that actually these metals are used in quantity and more quantity in our laptops, in our telephones, and in a lot of other products across our with regards to the tailpipe emissions, I think that was one of the things that wasn't picked up on. I think what we refer to here is to try and differentiate it from carbon emissions per se, because tailpipe emissions actually contain the harmful elements and the microscopic particles and the other elements which can be pollutants at low level. And obviously electric vehicles and the HVO vehicles could significantly reduce these tailpipe emissions, therefore not only having a benefit on reducing carbon emissions, but improving local air quality as well. But I think everything else was covered off, if that's okay.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Simon. Rosa, do you want to come back in? Okay, thanks very much. I find myself thinking that perhaps the Environment and Sustainability Panel needs to go on a fact-finding mission to learn more about this, because it's something that's come up last year. I can see heads nodding around the table. I think we need to get the answers to this stuff. Field trip, great. Matt, can we leave an action for Mel to do the research on a trip to Barbados? I'm just kidding. No, thank you. I think that's really, really been helpful. Next, it's great to see we've got a number of hands up for contributions this evening. I'll take you all in turn. Next on my list is Councillor Gocher, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think as a strategy, the idea of looking at the practicalities the costs involved in a range of different options is a good strategy. So I welcome the report. Thank you. Just a couple of points. On page 32 of the pack and 33 of the pack, there's a big table which lists vehicle types and estimated lifespan from new. I'm presuming this is the existing fleet. But I'm about surprised that the lifespan is only 7 years for so many of them. What I suppose what my question is going to get at, because I've been asked this, is have we researched the carbon footprint involved in the actual construction of new vehicles and the disposal of the old ones? The reason I ask that question, because I've been asked it, is anticipating questions that we might be asked, because if we are setting a target for 2030 for shifting to a different type of fleet, what we will be asked is it more in keeping with reducing emissions to let the existing fleet all reach its natural end before replacing each vehicle, rather than going for that target and maybe replacing vehicles that are still in working order? I mean, we will ask that question, so I'm just wondering if we've researched it. I don't expect an answer tonight in terms of the answers. I mean, a part of the reason I asked that question as well is a relative of mine, for example, has got a cooker in the house that has been there since 1960, and it's still in working order. Now, obviously, it will be not very good in terms of energy efficiency, but at the same time, they've not been consuming new cookers. So, what we will be asked is what is the carbon footprint of replacing each vehicle? But as I said, I mean, back to my original point, I'm surprised that the existing fleet only has a lifespan of 7 years, but I suppose they get used a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gocher. Rosa, are you happy to? Great, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a bit of an industry standard and around the life expectancy of our vehicles, and so we work to 7 years. However, we're in quite a fortunate position. I don't know if you're aware, but Cabinet made a decision a few years ago that with our fleet, we would move to procuring our own fleet, whereas in the past we would have been under lease. And so at the end of the lease, we would be then handing that back and getting a nice brand new vehicle. But the council wanted to move towards looking at more purchasing and owning its own fleet. And we're in the really privileged position now where we do own the majority of our fleet. And we do take that pragmatic approach. I work very closely with the fleet manager for the council. And it's part of that kind of business case development within the strategy, is looking at how is that vehicle being used? How frequently is it being used? What's its mileage? How all of those aspects, and actually, can we continue running it for a bit longer, rather than it being replaced? But you are quite right. Some of the fleet, for example, the refuse trucks, they are, for want of a better term, the workhorses of our organisation, and they are used incredibly well. So we do take a bit more of a pragmatic approach, but we have to have a framework that gives us that point in time that we have to go, right, we're due to, this is forecasted to be the end of its useful life. Is it worth replacing now or not? Conversely, sweepers, we are having a bit of a reality check on that in terms of we've worked towards a 7-year life for that, and we've realised that they are worked so hard that actually their useful life is probably much lower and is 3 to 5 years. So as part of, yes. So going forward, we do take, as I say, more pragmatic, informed decision making on at what point do we replace them and what point do we look at looking for the next option for it. In terms of carbon footprint, in terms of the whole life of a vehicle, it's not something we do at the moment, but it's something I think is a really good and interesting point that, again, could be built into our business cases as we go forward, maybe using the Energy Saving Trust and other experts to help us calculate what that would look like. I don't know if colleagues at the Energy Saving Trust do want to input, or Simon on that.
Yeah, thanks, Rosa. I'd like to bring Simon Davison in again, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just with regards to the life cycle analysis, I think in any decision we make of this importance and this financial position, I think it will be absolutely key to start taking into consideration the whole life cycle analysis and make these comparisons. For instance, Rosa just spoke about sweepers. Now, our diesel sweepers have got a life cycle of probably about 3 or 4 years. Electric sweepers look like they may have actually quite a significantly longer life cycle, as would electric vehicles. So these considerations need to be looked at in full when we make the decision.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you very much there, Simon. I guess one of the questions that's coming up for me, and I will return to colleagues momentarily, is what's the sort of time sensitivity on this item? Is it, you know, absolutely crucial that a decision is made this evening, or could it be deferred back for the March meeting once the additional information has been found? Thanks, Rosa.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've already got a fleet transition plan in place that was approved a few years ago. So we're still continuing to work towards that. So yeah, if you wish to defer it for further updates, that's absolutely fine.
Next on my list, I've got Councillor Dundas, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Let's get my laptop back to life. I think on the whole, reading through the report, I think it's generally pretty good. I think it's got quite a good sort of dose of practicality and reality on top of everything. You know, I don't want to get into an EV debate, but I think there's definitely a difference between the small vehicles and the large ones, whereas we can probably say we're sort of onto version 2 of EV cars now, but HGVs and heavy vehicles, they're really at the beginning of their journey. Sorry about the pun, but you know, this is really new technology. They're not widely available. They're not being manufactured in volume. They are very expensive, and actually, if you look at the ranges and that compared to the cars, which have come on, I mean, I think you know, 10 years ago, a Nissan Leaf did 60 miles and cost a fortune and whatever. Now they're regularly doing 250. The price is beginning to come down. So you're going to see a big change on the HGVs in the next few years, I think, as new tech comes on. And you know, can we justify the price? Twice the cost. They're twice the cost of the talking about the RCVs here. So it's 400 and something instead of 200 and something in the
I'm
chat.
confused by the acronym. That's my face.
Oh, sorry. Refuse something collection vehicles. Sorry, dust carts, to use an old term. But I think that there will probably be some new tech coming on them at some point, which will have a very dramatic change in what they can do. But I do have some specific questions around it, though, and this is really concentrating on the RCVs because I think that's where the big issue is. When we looked a few years ago at the Shrub End depot, if I recall correctly, there was an issue over its sheer physical shape and size and capacity of being able to charge, in terms of actually accommodating the vehicles and the way they're parked, a full fleet of EV dust carts. Should we go that way? So I guess my first question is, if we were to consider moving to an EV fleet, do we first have to accept that Shrub End is not the right place to be, and we actually have to make the decision to obtain a new depot before we can actually make that move to EV dust carts? The other thing is, in the report, there's a lot of details about the fuel consumption of diesel and HVO cars, but there's no EV fuel consumption in the report. Obviously, they've all got a miles per kilowatt hour figure, so I just don't know why that's not in the report. Surely it needs to be. Also, and I hesitate to bring this up, a hell of a lot of EV vehicles which we think of as European because they've got European badges on, or American. If you buy a Volvo EV, if you buy a Tesla EV, if you buy an MG EV, they are all made completely in China by Chinese companies. Is that an issue that, as a council, we should have any view on where we obtain
our vehicles from in terms of the country of manufacture? I don't know, but I just thought I'd put it out there because the badge on the front does not necessarily mean where it's built. There's not much European manufacture of some of the stuff at the moment, or they're almost brought in knockdown kits. They've got European badges on the front, but I think even Volkswagen make a lot of their cars in China now. So that's one question. And also, we're talking about end of life. I mean, do we apportion any residual value to our vehicles after 7 or 10 years, or do we just assume they're scrap and they're worth nothing? Or do we sell them? I don't know what we do with them. So we also, if we sell them or we get something back, we need to look at comparative residual values on these. And a 10-year-old electric RCV brought in 2025 might not be worth a lot in 2035 if it's really old tech. So that's a consideration. I assume on the HVO fuel, it's just a fuel. So if we buy a vehicle, we can mix and match. We can try it, we can use 10% of it, 30% of it. So I don't really see we've got a great deal to lose by having that option, personally. And on that, it talks about the 90% reduction in CO2 with HVO. Is that out the tailpipe? Where is that coming from? Is there a reduction in its manufacturer compared to refining diesel, or what? And finally, what's the price per litre of HVO compared to normal diesel?
Thank you very much for that significant and substantial contribution, Councillor Dundas. I'll come back to Rosa in a moment, but one of the things that struck me when I was initially reading this report is how fantastic it would be if we could utilise the used cooking fats from all of the different outlets that we've got across the city, pop them into our fleet. Now, is that not the definition of recycling? Rosa?
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely. But as I said earlier, the 90% reduction in CO2, you do have to be careful on where you're sourcing your HVO from, and that's yeah. So you've got to be careful and make sure it's certified, etc., etc. And used vegetable oil, obviously, there's a limited resource because there's only so much, and we're seeing lots of other local authorities now that are converting to HVO. But you are right in that we can purchase a diesel vehicle and then just start filling it up with HVO, but it's an infrastructure point. We've got 2 fuel tanks at Shrub End. So as part of the trial that we undertook, we filled one with HVO and kept the other one running on diesel, which enabled us to just assess the impact of having HVO in some of our fleet, not all of our fleet. We wanted to make sure that there was no maintenance issues, that our drivers were happy with it. But in terms of cost, I don't have the latest cost, but we do, alongside our pricing monitoring of diesel, we also get HVO pricing in just so that we can see how the market's operating. From my recollection, but I can confirm that, it is higher in cost compared to diesel. Diesel is cheaper. There is a hand up. Simon.
Simon, do you want to come in?
Can I just pick up on one more point in terms of residual value? Because we do purchase the vehicles now, we're in sort of that first phase of purchasing those vehicles. But I've got a couple of old vehicles that we've had, and yeah, we do sell them. But again, we are pushing our vehicles to as much as we can, considering the budget situation. So the residual value, there isn't a lot there because we've pretty much pushed them as far as they can and probably use some of the parts to help replace on other vehicles, just because we're trying to get the absolute most out of them. So just to answer that point, yeah. If I can hand over to Simon, is that okay? Simon?
Yeah, just very quickly on the HVO. It's fully mixable with diesel, so you could potentially just drop it into a tank which already contains diesel, so you could potentially go for a 50-50 mix. The current cost of HVO roughly runs at about 20 to 30% of an uplift in cost compared with diesel, and we are actively looking with other councils within Essex to look at potential framework procurements to see if we can bring those costs down through bulk buying.
Councillor Dundas, do you have a supplementary?
No, I think that's fine. Yeah, I think what Rosa was saying as regards to, I've got no idea what residual values of dust carts are, but I think she was saying is don't buy one off us.
Thank you. We look after them very well.
Unfortunately, Councillor Dundas, I can't assign homework, otherwise I'd send you away to find that out. Councillor Summers, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Rose. Just on page 39 of the report regarding the potential costings, with the fuel running costs, 0.32 per kilowatt a day or 1.25 per litre, what does that translate to in pence per mile? Because that's the comparison I'm actually looking for. I mean, obviously, I know it depends on the exact vehicle, but just some sort of average would be good, or perhaps, you know, even the lifetime running cost of a vehicle over the 7 years before they limp off into the sunset. Thank you.
Got some phenomenal imagery coming out of panel this evening. Thank you, Rosa.
Again, I'll have to take that away and then work with my officers to understand how we can get to that point. Thank you.
Great. And Councillor Warnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to just raise something that normally would pass over quite quickly in a paper before us, but it's item 6, equality, diversity and human rights implications, and 6.1 says the relevant impact assessment can be found here. And when you press here, you begin to see that you probably need some more flesh in the report when you're dealing with what are likely to be sizable contracts, because the term social value. And when you read the document, it not only talks about making sure that the living wage is being paid, it actually goes beyond that. And my understanding is we have at least 17 social value indicators. And it also talks about supporting the sort of local economy. So whilst it may not be feasible in a contract like this, we should at least consider whether there's opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises to actually partake within the council's contract. So I think it would be helpful to you if item 6 was to be fleshed out more, so you can see what is and isn't, or what can and can't be done in terms of the Social Value Act and the council's adopted social value indicators. Thank you.
That's a really excellent contribution. Thank you, Lou. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Councillor Warnes. Rosa, do you want to come back on that, please?
Yeah, again, I will go and work with officers and see what we can bring forward in terms of that, especially from my procurement colleagues who are the sort of experts in the Social Value Act, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, please.
Tiny point, it's only because it's come up from what has just been said, is could we find ourselves being able to provide HVO to other people, as in businesses within Colchester? If we're the people that are storing it, I'm not expecting queues of cars at the Shrub End depot. We've already got queues of people who have a booking system for filling up your tank. I just wonder if there's an opportunity there, a business opportunity, given that you have to buy fairly large quantities of it. You were talking about having to be careful about where you get your HVO from, if you're using that in your emissions calculation or what have you, and carbon calculation. That's probably the same with electricity, isn't it? And how much carbon is generated by the electricity isn't necessarily coming from renewables. If that's coming from other than renewables, then actually that's having a greater impact anyway. So when you're making your calculations, it's bloody difficult. When you start looking at all of this thing, I mean, I was looking at something online about HVO because I didn't really know anything about it, and looking at the comparison between battery EV versus renewable fuel, and the emissions is a massive difference, it's saying in here. So over 1,000 miles, it says emissions on EV 51.37 kilograms of CO2, whereas on HVO it's 3.56. I mean, it's monumental. On 20,000 miles, it's 1,027 kilograms of CO2 from an EV, whereas it's 71 from HVO. So it's monumental differences. So I'm actually really interested. I wouldn't mind this being deferred, to be honest, Chairman, just because I think there's an awful lot more research to be done, A, by panel members, and B, maybe a little bit more substantive stuff within the report that we get, so that we understand what we're comparing with what. But it's a fascinating subject.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Ellis.
Well, no, sorry, well, if we're talking about, the comment being made by my colleague here, saying we're all going back to diesel, we should all go back to diesel cars, or is that what I'm saying? Not at all. Although HVO, it's fascinating. And I just wonder if the costs come down if we're buying, just as I belong to an oil syndicate for my house, I have to have heating oil. The cost is substantially lower because of the quantity that we're paying in the village, because we all club together to buy our heating oil. I wonder if you get the same thing with this. My car is an AdBlue diesel. It is a diesel car, I'll hold my hands up, but I'm told by, I actually had one of the people that designed the AdBlue system stayed with me, and he's saying effectively it's emitting water. That's actually what comes out of my tailpipe, is water. So he said your car is greener than just about any other vehicle on the road, although you're probably paying more tax for it as a diesel, because what comes out of it, we put in cow urine, and what comes out of it is water, effectively, because that's what's being injected into the fuel system. It's a fascinating thing, but anyway, it depends where you're talking about your tailpipe emissions, exactly what you're mentioning in tailpipe emissions, but mine emits water. It's a diesel.
Your contributions, as always, are very valuable. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Rosa, do you wish to respond to the comments regarding Councillor Ellis' tailpipe? In that case, I'd like to invite Councillor Cox to make her contribution.
Can't really follow that, Councillor Ellis, but I was just trying to bring us back to why we're doing this. Rosa said at the beginning, 25% of the overall council emissions come from our fleet, so that's why this paper is vital, and that's why I think if I take all the points raised, I'm not very keen to hold it up. Can we minute our recommendations on it and let Cabinet take that on as well, rather than slowing down the process further? I personally would be happy to adopt it as a working document, as a framework, with the additional minuted points that we've made, to help them in their further deliberations. That would be my view, because the urgency of this is key, and reducing those particulates from those emissions is key.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. I think that's also a really valuable contribution there. I have had a quick hand from Councillor Dundas. And
Very,
I'm going to
very
look to
brief.
wrap. I haven't finished yet. Can we all remember that we are a fully constituted council panel with responsibilities to behave in accordance with everything that we're supposed to do? Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, Chair. It was just very, very briefly to pick up on Councillor Summers' point about cost per mile. I mean, the report doesn't say how many miles a typical vehicle does before we set it on, so we probably can't work out that cost. But I mean, in terms of fuel cost per mile, the report says they do between 4 and 5 miles per gallon. There's 4.5 litres in a gallon, so the cost per mile on fuel is £1.25, and presumably we're reclaiming the VAT, which is why that figure is lower than the advertised pump price.
Okay, can I ask for any final contributions on the matter? Okay, well, in light of the fact that we've essentially had two competing suggestions, I'd actually like to move to a vote this evening. So the next the next panel meeting that we've got is the 21st of March. So if the decision were to be to defer, if the decision were to be to defer in accordance to obtain the additional information that's been requested, I would look for this to be coming back no later than the 21st of March. I certainly have no interest in seeing it go further down the road. That said, I believe in the power of democracy, and I'm going to ask panel members to vote. So all those in favour of making the recommendation subject to the amendments this evening, please raise your hands. Thank you. All those technically I should say all those against and then do the other vote the other way. But if I could say the other option, which is all those in favour of deferring this item until the next panel meeting, in order to obtain that additional information, please raise your hands. Okay, thank you. Lower your hands. And any abstentions? In that case, by a majority of 7 to 2, we're going to defer this item until next month, and I'm going to ask Rosa. To get the answer to those questions. I appreciate there's a lot of additional information requested, but if that could be prioritised, bring it back in time, and hopefully next month we can be moving this forward. And thank you very much, everyone. I have had a request for an additional comfort break in light of the fact that we have now been going for 2 hours. So can I break for 5 minutes and we come back for the final items? Many thanks, everyone. Welcome back to the third instalment of the Environment and Sustainability Panel. We're here, we're live at Colchester Town Hall on Thursday, the 8th of February. It feels like it's a week later, but it's still the same day. We're going to move on to item number 9 now, which is the standing item on our agenda, the Climate Emergency Action Plan update. And for this, I'm going to hand over to Officer Ben to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So yeah, this is the regular update report about various sort of projects and actions that we're working on, or others that we can help promote. I guess they're all relevant, and happy to take questions on any of the listed. I guess the one that's quite important to promote from like a timely perspective is the Solar Together scheme. It's a scheme that Essex County Council organise in accordance with the company Solar Together. Essentially allows people to get access to cheaper solar panels and or battery storage for their home than if they were to apply on their own. So basically what happens is the resident expresses an interest in wanting solar panels or battery storage for their property. SMEs, so small and medium-sized enterprises, are also allowed if they own the building, if they've got permission to put panels on the building. Basically, they express an interest in wanting them. They join a collective group of people. From what I can see, the latest figure on the website is 1,972 households have signed up across Essex for this round of it. So you sign up, and there is then a auction done with the installers, with them all bidding against each other to deliver the projects at the lowest price possible. Because you've got that scale of demand there, it offers them at a cheaper price than if they were to go alone. So if there's someone who's maybe thinking about it, with energy prices being still high, there's opportunities for residents to save money on their energy bills if they consider looking at this. And yes, so the deadline for that, for registering, is the 23rd of February. That does not commit them to anything at all. It's just simply expressing interest. They then following the auction, they then get sent a formal offer which they can accept or decline. And details of how to apply are in the report. But yeah, happy to take any questions on the other updates as well.
Councillor Gocher, please. Thanks very much, Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for the update. And I'm just a little bit concerned about point 5.6, which is the air quality annual status report, and the suggestion that 2 of the 3 remaining air quality management areas are being proposed for removal. Obviously, I welcome the status report that suggests that air quality is improving in Colchester. I know we've done a lot to kind of get people to switch off their engines when they're engine idling and so forth. However, the areas mentioned have a long history of being extremely bad in the past. The junction between East Street and Ipswich Road I'm very familiar with, you can taste the pollution down there sometimes. Lucy Lane I'm not really familiar with, but I understand it has a history as well. So I appreciate that it may have been within legal limits in the more recent monitoring, but I just think it's a bit premature, given the history, to be talking about removing the air quality management from those 2 areas. I certainly do agree with the bit further down, however, about making sure that the junction with Brook Street and East Street and East Hill and Osborne Street and Mersey Road are included in the management. Thank you.
I haven't got too much to immediately come back on. I don't work directly on the air quality work. There's other people in my team who do. So I don't want to, without 100% knowing, I don't want to say who sort of suggested that the idea that they can be removed. I know that in the annual status report, it's sort of noticed that the pollution in those areas had been reduced significantly and below recommended guidelines, I think, set over a couple of years. So that's why they recommended for removal. But I will flag it with staff in the council because there is a report coming to the next panel meeting on air quality. So that can definitely be picked up, made clear about why that decision was made, who recommended it, that kind of thing.
Thanks very much, Ben. Councillor Summers, please.
Hi, yeah, just going to the green events code of 5.1. I was just thinking back to what happened in Castle Park with regards to the festival that took place. I think it was in October, wasn't it? And the state that the park was left in. So obviously, you know, it's great to have events in the park, but yeah, really damaging as well. So what sort of mitigations can be in place so we can still continue to have events in the park, but without, you know, trashing the grass so that nobody else can use it for the rest of the winter, things like that? Thanks.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back. I mean, I don't know anything sort of tangible specifically that we could do on that. I mean, part of the project will be looking about ways that we can adapt our sort of events policy, perhaps things like site permission forms that sort of encourage maybe greater care of those spaces. Something I can raise. I mean, at the moment, the activity plan for that project is not been formally like agreed or anything. So it's something we could potentially look at, but not going to make any commitments to do that. But I think everyone was well aware, and it's obviously the park is visited by so many people. When something like that does happen, it's very visible, and yeah, people don't like it, and that's the one reason why we tried to sign up to the pilot, because we realised that events are very public things. If you do something badly for the environment, it gets picked up on. If you look like you're making positive steps, it also gets picked up on. The chance to educate people who come to the events as well, it seems like a good sort of, that's why we got involved in the pilot. But yeah, it's something that we can look at.
I'm going to ask Mel to come in on this as well.
Yeah, just because obviously I'm also responsible for the Parks, Countryside and Open Space part of the service. So as Ben has said, in terms of sort of attending events and raising awareness for people attending, that's all in hand. But you're right, there have been concerns raised about the state of our lovely park after some of the events. And I do know the events team are working really closely with the Parks and Countryside team to look at how this can be mitigated and prevented going forward. And one of such things, it might seem a bit bizarre, but it's all to do with time of year and how quickly the ground recovers after such events. So I do know they've agreed that this year the Oktoberfest will be in September, which sounds a bit odd, but it's to ensure that when the event is held, the ground is at the right time to enable a quicker recovery. So they are working really closely with the events team.
Yeah, I can imagine, obviously, 'cause it was a fairly miserable October, if I remember rightly, in some ways. So the ground was probably in a worse condition than it was in other years. So it's just weather dependent, I suppose. So we need to think about that when the events get nearer, I guess, see how the weather's reports are.
Thanks very much, Councillor Summers. And I have had assurances from officers that firework night will not be moved to June. Councillor Cox.
I was going to say, I mean, one of the pressure on the events company is to use the park more and more because they need to make money. They need to make money to fill holes in our budget. So it's about local government funding as much as anything, and lack thereof. Yes, well, I was just going to ask Ben, if you could just talk me through the rationale for picking these things to update us on. Is that because that's where the activity's been, or what's the systematic approach to updating us on the climate action plan? Thanks.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Yeah, it is generally things that are happening live, that have happened since the last meeting, new developments and things like that. We are at the moment reviewing the action plan, because technically it was an action plan written to end in 2023. So we are looking to update that, and as part of that we would do a full sort of update on sort of where certain actions got to as part of creating the new one. But yeah.
Councillor Cox?
It's no criticism, but I do feel there's a certain urgency to this, isn't there, that this isn't just any other old plan, this is the climate action plan to reduce our emissions, and we need to really push on with it.
So Ben, can I ask for that to be included in next month's update, just picking up that point?
Might be tight to get full updates from, the action plan isn't just me, it's barely me, to be honest. I just coordinate a lot of it. There's projects from a lot of people around the council, so I think it'd be tricky to actually get a full summary of all of them.
No, pardon me, I mean specifically Councillor Cox's point, just on that one there.
About
the park and the focus on, I'm brain blanking. Pam, help me out here.
Well, I think we should push for updates from everybody on what they're doing on climate emergency, even if it's a short update. That's the point of this panel.
I take it on board your point there, Ben. Actually, I'm going to defer to Mel on this one and get your sense of what a time scale would be, because there is the climate emergency, but I also appreciate officer workloads as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, the Climate Emergency Action Plan is part of a bigger piece of work that Simon and myself are working on in terms of the carbon reduction management strategy, and the action plan will sit as part of that. So I think we can commit to obviously sending the document round and requesting updates from officers, but obviously Ben hasn't got time to then send 3 chases, so we can certainly circulate it, ask for updates, and we'll bring back what we've got to the next meeting.
Yeah, I'm not trying to make more work for Ben, I'm trying to support Ben in what he's doing in a very denuded team, I think. So anyway, thanks.
No, I fully appreciate that. And again, thank you, Ben, for the work that you do, Mel, your team as well. I think this ties in quite nicely with something that we've previously discussed in the chairs briefings, where there was in December a request from a Have Your Say speaker to kind of benchmark where we're up to and how we're doing. So one of the proposals I made was that this be incorporated into the end of this municipal year, where we look on what we've achieved as a panel, but also how we're benchmarking it against the CEAP as well. So hopefully this isn't an additional unexpected piece of work, but that would be great to tie that together. Thank you. And I've seen so many hands just now, I've lost it. Was it Councillor McCarthy? Please.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just a quick one, Ben. Myself and Councillor Warnes were quite excited by the whole Vision 2025 thing. And we clicked on the link and there's quite a lot to go through. So I just wondered if you could give us a bit of a flavour on what sort of policies and methods we would be looking to help event organisers with. And equally, would that be something that would come into place this year, next year? Or yeah, if you could just give us a bit of a flavour of that.
Yeah, so when I mention policies, I mean like the Colchester City Council events policy. So I think within the current one, which was adopted in 2020, there's no reference made to sustainability, climate emergency, nothing. I think because of the time that it was done, it wasn't such a council priority like the strategic plan and things like that. So we want to reference that. I think we want to also consider things with the help of experts, sustainability professionals from Vision 2025, things that are realistic to mandate from the outdoor events industry, events promoters, about what can be done at events. I think that's what we're trying to just sort of, we're saying we don't really know. You work in both the sustainability and the event space. Yeah, what's realistic and what's ambitious. In terms of whether we do things this year or future years, I think having spoken with the events company, a lot of the events are already quite well in train in terms of their plans. So particularly with bigger events, I think it's very unlikely that like any of the sort of changes that we make to any like the events policy or anything like that actually apply to them in practice. We're keen to try and speak with them to say, right, these are some changes that we're thinking of making to our events policy. The other thing we're looking to sort of introduce is some sort of environmental assessment of the event, sort of like some questions that we can ask them to sort of say, are you doing this, are you doing that, and to kind of get their feedback on that. But I don't think we'll actually use it in practice for events in 2024, but more about, yeah, seeing how it fits in with what we currently do and how people can apply for events and just seeing what's sort of, yeah, realistic.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Ellis, please.
Thank you. Well, it could always be any other business, really, Chair. It's while we've got Ben here, just to ask a question of, he puts out a climate communications newsletter to all members, which is excellent. Does that go any further than us? So I tell my parish councils about it and things in it, and they have applied for grants that you highlight within it, and I've also put people in touch with you, Ben, you've been very helpful to them. I just wonder, do we disseminate that information more widely, because it's excellent and people I know have used it to get funding, and I wonder if we should be sending it far wider. I can't find it on our website, for instance. Just looking at it, it would be a really helpful thing. It's something that you produce that is a real benefit to far wider than just members, and I think we need to make sure that it's accessible to everybody in Colchester. That's all.
Yes, to come back on that, it's good to hear that it is read, because I can't tell that it's read. I do get occasional replies from people that says it has been read, it has been, and to be honest, it's more kept as like a bank of information. You usually see a lot of it doesn't change, but a few things updated every so often. So I do send it. The standard goes to members and parish councils, and since January, we've also started sending it to the communities team, who have their communities newsletter. So I think they pick bits out that they haven't already got. Like, I think they cover quite a lot of grants as well. So I think they pick up bits that are relevant. If there's a place it can sit on the website, I didn't necessarily know there was a place it could sit on the website. If there is a place, and if it's somewhere that people actually visit, yes, for sure. I think there's kind of like a lot of the grants and stuff might give quite good links to community groups. Hence, we made that link with the communities team. So we have looked to do that, yeah. But if we can put it on the website somewhere, I'm more than happy.
That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. And yeah, I assure you, Ben, it's very much read. It's an excellent report every month, so thank you. Okay, any additional comments, queries, etc.? Wonderful. In that case, I'm going to move to our final item of the evening, which is item 10, which is the work programme, another standing item. And for this, we're going to hear from Matt.
Thanks, Chair. The only thing on the work programme I want to draw the panel's attention to is the carbon management plan, which was deferred from this meeting to next, but I understand is now due to be pushed a bit further back into the new municipal year. And that's the only change to the work programme I would ask the panel to approve. Obviously, we've already heard that the fleet transition strategy will come back next meeting. So those two things, really, if you're happy to approve them, I'd be grateful.
All in favour? Marvellous. Thank you very much. That's unanimous, Matt. Okay, in that case, if there are no further items of business, I'd like to thank you all for your time this evening. Thank you, officers, as well. Have a great rest of your journey. The rest of your evening and get home safe.